Howdy! Can you tell by my shirt? We're doing tie-dye techniques today. We're gonna try a few different ones, give some ideas, see how they work out. Some of them I've done before, some I haven't. So, first one we're gonna start with is how do I make a shape? So I have like a bit of a trefoil here. Didn't do a very good job on it, but you can make it better than what I did, and I'm gonna show you how. So, let's start. All right. To make a shape, so I just have a small piece of cloth. To make a shape, it's best if you have a solid closed shape instead of one that has openings. It's a little harder to do with one with openings. It's a little more complicated. So any kind of closed shape. So I have a trefoil, I have a heart. I'm going to use a trefoil. I just cut these out of cereal boxes, cardboard. And your first thing you're going to do is you're going to trace. And it doesn't have to be beautiful, but the better you can trace it will be good. I'm using pencil because I can get rid of the pencil. Pencil washes out. Any other thing like pen or marker may not. And you don't want something that's going to bleed. So pencil also doesn't bleed when you go to dye. And then the other thing I have is some thread. I'm using red thread so you can see. You may not want to use color thread unless you know that the color is not going to bleed, because the thread is going to stay on your cloth while you're dyeing. And I've done 2 strands and then just tied them. Whoop, now I've tied them together at the end. I don't know if you can see that. And it doesn't matter where you start on your pattern, and it doesn't matter if you're coming from behind or in front of, but you're going to make what's known as a basting stitch, which is really, really big stitches all along your outline. So, basting stitch is also known as a gathering stitch. So I'm just going in, out, pull it through. You can see how big my stitches are. They're like the width of my finger. They don't have to be regular size, like some can be big, some can be small, but you don't want to make them too small, because once we get around the whole outline, you're going to yank it together. So I'm going to keep sewing, and also you need to end at wherever your corners are. So that was a corner for me. So I need to end my stitch there and then move on. And any type of odd place, like the middle of this heart, I need to end a stitch there and then start again. And I need to end a stitch right here. You can't just hop over to the next side because you're going to lose that part of your outline if you do. Ta-da! One of the things that you might note, I have very little thread left. If you end up with not enough thread, just keep pulling it. It's okay, because that's exactly what you want to do anyway. So, next what you're going to do is you want to gather all the middle section up, and you're just going to pull your thread to make that happen. And see how it tightens all in. And you want to make sure it's all the rest is down, all the middle is up. And then what I like to do is I wrap my thread right around that middle. So you're making like a little ghosty. So the other thing is, when you pull in, it makes all of those lumps disappear and become one line, which is what you're looking for, because we're tie-dyeing. So I'm just gonna tie this off. All right, I didn't bring scissors. So, you can stick it back in if you want. See if I can snap it. There we go. All right, then you're going to take a rubber band. Now, depending on how thick you want your line here, you might want a fatter rubber band, a thinner rubber band. I'm going to use a fat one. And just like you would normally do for tie-dyeing, wrap it, wrap it, wrap it. And yeah, if you want a thinner line here, like mine's going to be super thick, you can use that thinner rubber band, a smaller rubber band, anything like that. Okay, now I'm going to dye this end one color, this end another, or you can dye them both the same color and the outline will stay white. So you have options. Alright, our next design is going to be the spiral. This is actually one of the easiest ones, but comes out really cool. If this is your shirt, you pinch and then twist. It's a lot easier to twist when there's a bigger piece of cloth. And you just keep spiraling, literally, up your cloth and tucking it around. Now mine's super small because it's a small piece, but you can see we've got that nice swirl design. And then you only need a few rubber bands for this one to secure it in that shape. They don't even have to be necessarily that tight, unless you want very distinct lines. And depending on how many colors you're planning to use, you use that many rubber band, well, half of that many rubber bands. So if I want 6 colors, I use 3 rubber bands, only because it creates the wedges where you're going to put your dye. You don't actually have to if you're pretty good. Like right now I have 4 spaces, but if I wanted to use more colors, I could just put one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, if I wanted to. It works out better with fewer colors, I find. I like the effect with fewer colors. Like 3 colors I think is pretty much ideal. When you start getting so many colors, it's super busy and not always as good looking. You can also do a double spiral. My little odd shape. And it's the same process, it's just I want to do one over here. And I think I want to do one going the opposite way over here. And I'm just going to try and get the spirals to come up and meet each other. And you might have to do a little bit of folding to get your cloth exactly where you want it. So I'm swinging it around, and the more folds you end up with, the more pattern you end up with. So I have 2 spirals, and I have this like big floppy thing. I want to fold that in because the folds are what causes the different stripes and designs. So you don't want it to be flat, you want it to be folded as much as possible. So one swirl here, one swirl there, same thing. We're going to take a rubber band, we're going to portion them off. On a bigger piece, like on a t-shirt, I would do each of these spirals separately with separate rubber bands because that would make a cooler design. In fact, I'm going to see if I can separate them a little bit. My piece is small because it's a test piece for this demonstration. I didn't want to use a whole bunch of t-shirts. So I'm going to see if I can get them to be separate by using some smaller rubber bands. There we go. So that's one spiral. This is the other spiral. Over here. I have all this stuff I want to fold in. Mine's all fringy. So much fringe. So yeah, the folding and the rubber bands are the things that resist the dye and make the patterns. So that's going to be our double spiral. I'm going to keep going with other pattern designs. There are ones like, so I cut out one that looks like a t-shirt because if you fold a t-shirt in half, you can do designs that will mirror each other, be symmetric. One of them is a V design, which is, actually, we should do that first. We should do stripes. How do you make stripes? Anytime you want to make stripes, it's just I'm gonna fold it. Kind of like you fold like paper, paper fans. So I can make stripes this way. If I fold this all up, and then you can make more folds. The more folds you make, the better. And then rubber band each section. So depending on how many colors you want to do. So I'm losing my folds. No, stay. My finger's in there. That was not smart. So like if I wanted a tie-dye rainbow on my shirt, this is one of the methods I would use. And obviously, if you have your shirt this way, you can fold it this way, and it makes the stripes go this way, horizontally. You can fold it this way and make your stripes go vertically, okay? And then what you do is you put the different dye on each section. So like I have room on my piece right now for 5 colors. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one's a little short, but that's okay. So like I was saying, if I want the V, I'd fold it in half, and the V, the stripes are going up this way. So I'm gonna make folds going this way. Actually, I think I want to make them this way. Yeah, this way makes a nice V. I'm gonna try. My fingers aren't cooperating today, just so you know. And honestly, some of the hardest part is like, okay, how do I get my fabric to stay where it is? So on small pieces, it's harder to get the fabric to stay where it is because there's just not a lot of fabric, and the larger your item you're dyeing, the easier this is because there's more fabric and it stays put. Mine does not want to stay put. I'm going to keep trying to keep my folds here. And like I said, if you end up with more folds, that's half the fun of tie-dye, is having just these amazing folds that came out of nowhere, and you end up with like some of the best patterns that way. And you might even want to see how this end is floppy, and I only really want to dye it one color, but I want the folds to remain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a rubber band here at the end just to keep that fold together, because I don't want this fold to fan out and then all the dye gets in there and then there's no pattern. And I'm like, dude, I want a pattern. Also, white space. You do not have to dye every single inch of your fabric a color. Some of the best tie-dyes have space for white to bleed between the colors, the white of the shirt, and they look kind of amazing. Alright, oh, you know what we never did? The standard bullseye tie-dye design, which is super easy. You pinch your fabric, pull your fabric all in one direction from a point, and put rubber bands straight down. Also, you can do a bullseye, many bullseyes all over just by, you know, pull up a section here, put rubber bands, pull up a section here, put rubber bands. I can't really do it on my small pieces to make several bullseyes, but actually the shirt I'm wearing has several bullseyes on it. I can pull back and show you in a minute. Bullseyes are really good, particularly for those tie-dyes where you're making, like the first one I showed you, which was the shape. When you have a shape in the center, like say this heart, and you've done that, and then do a bullseye around it, it really highlights it, and it makes a great look. So this one's our bullseye. Another one is just a crumple. So we're just making folds, just crumpling it up any which way, and then loosely putting some rubber bands on it. Take thinner rubber bands. You can tell my rubber bands have been used for tie-dye a lot. So you don't want to put it too tight because you want the dye to be able to get into these spaces. So that's why I'm not tying it super tight with the rubber bands. I'm just doing it like one through. And yeah, mostly it's just to preserve the crumples, so the rubber band can go in different directions. So that's our crumple one. Okay, well, now here is the final step, obviously. I have some dye here, and I like to use the squeezy bottles because then you can get the dye right where you want it. I have bowls to catch my water, so there's no big secret to how to dye, so I'm not gonna show all of these. I'm just gonna basically you just dye sections. Try and squeeze it in places. Make sure that you've pre-washed your fabric. All fabric has a finish to it that makes it resist being dyed. So you want to be able to get that off. And you can see even though, ooh, I've got dye on my finger. Even though mine has been pre-washed, the initial squeeze starts to run off a bit. Also want to talk a little bit about prepping your dye. If you're I'm using powdered dye and hot water, and it's a very small amount. I put powder in the bottom of my squeeze bottles and then put hot water in it, shake it up. You can also use liquid dye and then add more water. So I'm going to do a couple of these. I'm only going to film a slight bit. So this is the double spiral one. So I'm just going to hit sections with color. And you may have to squeeze it into sections. Especially mine, because mine's tight because it's small. But you don't need like big buckets to dunk it in unless you want to. Like I could take this and dunk it in there and let it absorb more. And that way some of this that's been falling off of this could be reused. If you're going to do that, have a different pan for each color. So this is multicolor, but I could do a pan of just red. And then I can just dunk it back in the red to try and get it to absorb in more places. Okay? But like I said, you don't want to be mixing your colors to do that. You're going to want them to be separate. So that's why I have all these pans that you can tell, have been used quite a bit, that are very dirty. This was probably the yellow pan, but now I've dripped some red in there. So I don't want to reuse that at this point. I'm going to go back to my multicolor. And yeah, I'm just going to get colors in different sections. Yep. And sometimes I might bleed over, and that happens. The other thing, rule of thumb, is if you're going to use a lighter color, use the lighter color first, and try to keep the other colors away from it so that you don't end up with mine where it's like, oh, well, the light color's not really going to show. Okay, now it's what you've been waiting for, the big reveal. So here we go. It's our first one. This is the traced design of the trefoil with a bullseye around it, followed by a stripe design. So you can also see that I probably should have used more dye, but you can see red, black, blue, green, yellow. So this was the one that was accordioned like a fan. This is the V design where you folded the shirt in half and then did that same folding. This is the crumple. So no discernible pattern. This is our spiral. And again, small pieces, probably should have used more dye. Same thing here, this is the bullseye. And then this is the double spiral. I actually went back and redid it because there wasn't enough dye in my original double spiral. And this one, I ended up with too much dye and lost some of that spiral, but you can see this spiral and how it would have gone into that one. So a little less dye on this one, a little more dye on some of the other ones. And so I do recommend doing just what I did, these little squares, and trying some stuff, figuring out what you like, and how to do it, and how much dye, how little dye, things like that, before you do it on your shirt.